And so I turned to elders for that also, and I said, okay, all right, help me to understand how to tell these people about what you guys do. And so one guy said, well, it's all story. And I said, okay, so what does that mean? Well, of course you have to say, how so, uncle? Right? That's the formula. And he said, well, what's left when you die? And you know, the stories that you told, that keep being told, and the stories that people tell about you, you know, after you're gone. So his point was, it's all story, you know. And then a little bit down the road, I was sitting with another elder, and he said, you know, he said, tell them that anything worth knowing can't be known. Yeah, and anything that you know isn't worth knowing. It's trivial. He didn't use the word trivial, but I did, but that was his point. His point is that anything that's really important is above our pay grade. And anything that is at our level of understanding is so simple that any idiot knows it anyway, so what's the point? And he said, so here's what we do. He said, we invent stories to explain what we can't know. And we pretend to know things that we don't know because it makes us feel good. And he said, you know, there's a lot of stories out there. He said, some say we came from Martians, some say we came from monkeys, some say we came from the Pleiades. You know, your friend Leo thinks we came from bacteria. He said, it's all true and it's all false. We don't have a clue. He said, so, you know, pick a story you like and stick with it. You know, and he said, he said, look at my life. This is my story. I like it. He said, but those people, you know, some of those people down the road, they got a different story. Some of them have the drunken Indian story, you know. Some of them have the important lawyer, judge story, you know, with the 10 martinis at nighttime, you know. I mean, everyone has a different story, he said. Everyone has a different set of truths about the world. And he said, so, you know, what you should tell them is, it's all made up. It's all an invention. It's all just a theory. You can't prove it. So why fight about it? You know, pick one you like and change it at will, you know, when it suits you. And I said, all right, I'll try and build that in. That's a good idea. And then the next guy told me, we started talking about mind, you know, because I said, well, you know, he was surprised to find out that there's a whole lot of journals about mind, you know, like the Journal of Mind and Behavior, and the I can't think of all the names of these right now, but there's a lot of journals with the word mind in them. And I said, so uncle, like, what do you think mind is? And he said, oh, you know, it is something in between people. And I said, what do you mean? You know, tell me more. And he said, well, you know, he said, it's sort of not real, this thing, this mind thing, you know. It's kind of an accident. He said, you know, you can't help. As a child, you just absorb all these stories, and you start repeating them to yourself. And the older you get, the more stories you're telling yourself. And eventually you convince yourself that there's something there that's telling these stories. You know, you convince yourself that there's something inside that holds all these stories, he said. But it's just but you know, these stories, they don't exist inside you. You're just repeating them. They exist outside of you. because you heard them. You took them in, you took their spirit in. Every story has a spirit, he said. And you took their spirit in, and once it got into you, then it kept telling the story. And if you tell a story long enough, you believe it. It becomes true. And he said, so really, he said, every relationship has its own set of stories. He didn't use the word set either. I made that up. He said, every relationship has a bunch of stories that go with it. And so when you walk into a room and you see someone you know, well, you just continue those stories with each other. And some of those stories have been going on for longer than you've been alive. Some of those stories have been passed down to you from your ancestors. That and maybe your great-grandfather and his great-grandfather told those same stories to each other. 100 years ago, they were still telling those stories, and now you are. And he said, so there isn't any mind to find. He said, it's just something them psychologists invent to have something to do. Yeah. And he said, and nobody ever got better going to a psychologist anyway. At least he didn't know anyone. He said, because they're looking for something that doesn't exist. They're trying to help you change something that isn't there. So how could they help you? And I said, well, what would you tell them they should do? And he said, well, I'd tell them, to help people to find better stories to live by. To just drop those stories that don't work and use new ones. And I thought about that for a while, and then I came back, and there were a couple other fellows there with him, and I said, well, what do you think about that idea? What do you think about that idea that like the psychoanalysts, that the past, determines the present? He said, the past is gone. It doesn't exist. He said, I don't care what happened in the past. He said, I don't need to know anything about the past. He said, all I need to know is what stories are you telling yourself in the present about what happened in the past? And he said, half of them are false anyway. If you got 20 people together in a room, nobody'd tell the same story about what happened. And probably none of them are true. He said, nobody remembers the past because it's gone. So who cares? And I saw this in some of the elders that I studied worked in the prison, because in Prince Albert, near where I lived, it was the provincial prison. And so they would go in to see these guys, and these guys would say, well, you want to know why I'm here? And they'd say, no. They say, I don't care what you did. And these guys would be shocked, right? Because they wanted to tell the story, And they would say, why don't you want to know what I did? He said, because it's already done. I want to know what we're going to do today. What are you going to do today? And and then these guys would say, well, doesn't it, how can I know what I'm going to do today? Because, doesn't the past matter? And they say, no, don't tell me anything about the past. You're here with me now. And I thought that was really, a profound way to work. And it kind of fits what I got really excited about in the last couple years, is that it fits neuroscience. It fits modern neuroscience.